The Terran freighter emerged from hyperspace into a barrage of laser fire. Captain Lyra Jackson gripped the armrests of her command chair as the ship shuddered under the onslaught. "Shields up! Evasive maneuvers!" she called to her crew over the blaring alarms. The ship's hull groaned in protest as another volley slammed into their defenses. "Captain, I'm picking up a hail," her communications officer reported. "It's from the Zythari warship." Lyra's brow furrowed. The Zythari? What were they doing attacking a civilian transport in neutral space? "On screen," she ordered. The forward display lit up with the angular features of a Zythari commander, his blue skin flushed with battle rage. "Terran vessel, you have violated Zythari sovereign territory," the commander accused. "Surrender immediately or be destroyed." "This is neutral space," Lyra objected. "We're a civilian freighter carrying medical supplies. Check your charts." "Enough," the commander snarled. "You have been conscripted into the war against the Krill Empire. Your ship and its cargo are now property of the Zythari Ascendancy. Comply or die." The view screen went dark. Larry slumped in her seat, mind-reeling. A war with the Krill? When did that happen? The Terran Confederacy had no part in this conflict. There had to be some terrible misunderstanding. She opened a channel to the Zythari commander. "Please, this is all a mistake. The Terran Confederacy is a neutral party with no stake in your war. Let us go and we'll—" The ship rocked as another barrage slammed into their weakening shields. "Shields down to 20%, her tactical officer warned. "Commander, I implore you," Lyra tried again. "We aren't combatants in your conflict with the Krill. Attacking us is a violation of interstellar law." "You Terrans are pathetically naive," the Zythari sneered. "In war, there is no law. You're either predator or prey, and the Zythari do not yield to prey." The transmission cut off abruptly. Lyra's shoulders sagged in defeat. They were outgunned and alone in hostile territory, shanghaied into an alien war they wanted no part in. She had to get her crew to safety, but how? Complying with Zythari demands went against everything she believed in. Yet openly defying them meant certain death. She noticed her medical officer lingering by the door to the bridge, clearly shaken by the attack. "Dr. Vaughan, unless this is an emergency, I need you to return to your post," Lyra said. The doctor nodded, gripping a medkit in trembling hands. "Captain, I heard what the Zythari said. Do you really think they'll force us to fight their war?" Lyra met his frightened gaze. "I don't know." "Oh," she admitted. "But I promise I will do everything in my power to get us out of this. The Terran Confederacy doesn't abandon its citizens." Dr. Vaughan swallowed hard and took a deep breath. "I trust you, Captain. We all do." He turned and hurried off the bridge. Alone with her bridge crew, Lyra considered her options. Open defiance of the Zythari would only get them killed, but quietly subverting their conscription to undermine the war effort and find an escape, that might just work. It would take guile, careful planning, and no small amount of luck. But Lyra had sworn an oath to protect her crew. Not even being dragged into an alien conflict could make her break that vow. "Ensign Jace, send a message to Terran Command on Epsilon Eridani," she ordered. "Encrypted burst transmission, highest priority, have been conscripted by Zythari Ascendancy into war against Krill Empire, attempting to avoid hostilities and safely extract ourselves. But we urgently need diplomatic intervention to extricate the Confederacy from this conflict. End message and transmit." "Yes, Captain," the ensign replied crisply. Lyra straightened her uniform. Time to play the part of reluctant conscript until they could make their escape. It was a dangerous game, balancing survival and principle. But she had no choice. Somehow she had to get her crew out of this war. What happened after that, whether the Terran Confederacy could stay out of the fray, would depend on the skill of the diplomats. As her ship limped reluctantly behind the Zythari battle group, Captain Lyra Jackson steeled herself for the hard road ahead. This was only the beginning. There would be difficult choices to make, innocents to protect, and perhaps even friends to lose before it was over. But as long as she held onto her principles, as long as she fought for what was right, there was still hope. The Terran freighter disappeared into the swirling colors of hyperspace. unwilling soldiers in a war that was not their own. The shockwave from the antimatter torpedo sent Lyra crashing to the deck. Emergency lights flickered feebly in the billowing smoke that filled the bridge. "Damage report," the captain called, hauling herself back into her chair. "Hull breach on deck 5, her first mate responded. "Emergency force fields in place, but we've lost main propulsion. The last Krill corvette didn't go down easily." Lyra suppressed a grimace, hating every moment her ship was forced to fight in the Zithari's brutal war. Over the weeks since their conscription, Lyra had done her best to wage a quiet campaign of delay and covert sabotage to thwart the Zithari war machine. Malfunctioning weapons, miscalculated jumps, supplies lost to mysterious accidents. All Lyra's efforts to impede the conflict without open rebellion. But those subtle acts of resistance carried a heavy cost. With every stalling tactic and failed offensive, the Zithari commanders grew more suspicious and ruthless. Lyra's crew was caught between the hammer of their alien overlords and the anvil of the Krill counterattacks. How long could they walk that knife's edge? An insistent beeping jarred the captain from her dark musings. An incoming hollow transmission from Zithari Command. She nodded to her comms officer. "Put it through." The glowering face of Admiral Xol, the vicious Zithari commander, materialized before her. "Your performance in this battle was unacceptable," he snarled without preamble. "A Terran freighter should have easily outmatched that Krill picket. If I didn't know better, I'd think you had no stomach for combat." "We aren't a warship, Admiral," Lyra replied evenly. "We're doing our best, but we don't have the firepower of a true battlecruiser." "Excuses!" Xol snapped. He thrust a clawed finger at the camera. "There is no room for weakness in this war. The ascendancy demands your full commitment. You Terrans had best embrace your role, or there will be consequences." The transmission cut out. Lyra fell back in her chair with a ragged sigh. Every day the wire they walked grew thinner. How much longer before it snapped? The sound of a throaty cough snapped her attention to the back of the bridge. A ragged figure huddled there, wrapped in a grimy mechanic's jumpsuit. One of the Zithari marauder boarding parties had dumped the Krill prisoner there after the battle, as a final insult to their Terran lackeys. Lyra crossed to the man and crouched down to meet his wary gaze. "Here," she said, offering her canteen. "You look like you could use this." The Krill clutched the canteen with scraped and oil-stained fingers. Lyra noticed his right leg was a cybernetic prosthetic. A war injury? After a long pull of water, he looked up at the captain. "Why are you doing this?" he asked in halting Terran standard. "Aren't you my enemy?" Lyra settled beside him with a weary exhale. "Honestly, I don't know anymore. My crew and I never wanted to be part of this war. The Zithari forced us to fight." She shook her head. "I'm trying to uphold my principles, but it's getting harder every day. I just want to protect my people." The Krill studied her for a long moment. "I am called Vrax. I served as an engineer on a Krill frontier explorer. Then the war found us." He looked down at his metal leg, his tone hollow. "My crew did not survive." "I'm sorry," Lyra offered, hearing the raw pain in his words. "If it means anything, I don't consider you my enemy. This isn't our fight." Vrax's eyes narrowed. "But you do fight. I saw your ship fire on Krill vessels. How are you different from the Zithari warmongers?" Lyra's gut clenched. We have to play along to avoid harsher punishments, but we're trying to resist in our own way, disrupting what we can. It's not much, but..." The Krill engineer blew out a sharp breath. "You are still killing in the name of an unjust cause. Where do you draw the line? When do the compromises made to survive erode your soul? Does intention matter when the results are the same?" Lyra felt anger kindle in her heart. "What choice do we have?" she snapped. "If we don't obey, the Zithari will destroy us and seize our ship anyway. At least this way, we can save some lives." "By taking others," Vrax replied grimly. The captain deflated, her flash of indignation guttering out. He was right, damn him. How long could she justify the blood on her hands, even with the best of intentions? What was the ethical path when every choice meant death? Before Lyra could muster a response, the howl of klaxons split the air. Massive energy signatures detected, her sensor operator called. A Krill battle fleet just dropped out of hyperspace, attacking the Zytheri lines. Lyra raced to her command station, her argument with Vrax forgotten as the crisis of the moment took precedence. But even as she snapped orders to her crew, the Krill's searing questions lingered at the back of her mind. What was the right thing to do when every path was paved with horror? How could she extract her crew from this nightmare without losing her humanity in the process? As her ship peeled away to flank the besieged Zytheri forces, Lyra gritted her teeth with renewed determination. She had to find an answer soon, because one fact was becoming inescapable. Whether by the guns of their enemies or the rod of their own principles, the Terran Confederacy could not survive this war unchanged. Something had to give, before it was too late for them all. "You're insane!" Admiral Kazal's eyes blazed with fury as he paced the confines of the briefing room. "After everything we've done for you, all the support we've given, you'd betray us like this?" Lyra stood firm under the Zythari commander's wrathful glare. "I'm trying to save both our peoples," she insisted. "This plan is the only way." "By negotiating with the Krill?" Kazal snarled. "Those savages can't be reasoned with." "That's exactly what they say about you," Lyra retorted. "Don't you see? This cycle of hate is destroying us all." In the months since the disastrous battle with the Krill ambush fleet, the tide of the war had turned against the Zytheri. The Krill, it seemed, had gained a powerful new ally and were now pressing the offensive. The Zytheri were being driven back on all fronts, their casualties mounting with each passing day. Lyra had watched it all unfold with a sense of growing dread. She knew that a Zytheri collapse would be disastrous for her crew. A desperate ascendancy was a dangerous master. She had to find a way out, and soon. That was when an encrypted message arrived from a most unlikely source. Vrax, the Krill prisoner she had spoken to all those months ago. He claimed his people were willing to negotiate a settlement to the war, but only if the Terrans mediated. He had never forgotten Lyra's principled stand, even in captivity. If anyone could bridge the gap between the warring factions, he believed, it was her. After much agonized deliberation, Lyra had decided to accept Vrax's proposal. The Zythari were in no position to refuse, and if there was even a chance of ending this conflict diplomatically, she had to try. For the sake of her crew, for the innocents on both sides, and for her own battered conscience. But convincing the prideful Zythari to come to the table was proving harder than she anticipated. Admiral Kazal looked ready to toss her in the nearest airlock. "You are in no position to dictate terms to the Ascendancy," the Admiral growled. "Remember your place, Terran." Lyra's jaw tightened. "My place is between you and a costly defeat," she said coldly. "Without a negotiated peace, the Krill will overrun your defenses within weeks. Is your pride worth the lives of your soldiers? Your civilians?" Kazal's fist clenched white at his side, but some of the fire faded from his eyes. Lyra could see the awful weight of the war pressing down on him. No commander wanted to admit their cause was lost. "The Krill have agreed to a ceasefire and peace summit," Lyra pressed, "at a neutral location with the Terran Confederacy as guarantor. It's a chance to end this conflict with honor intact. Don't let this opportunity slip away." The Zytheri admiral was silent for a long, tense moment. Then his shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. "You Terrans are too soft for your own good," he muttered. But there was no venom in it anymore. Just exhaustion. He looked up at Lyra, a strange mix of resentment and respect in his eyes. "Send your comm codes to the Krill. If they're serious about negotiating, the Ascendancy will consider it. But if this is a trick..." "It's not," Lyra promised. "Vrax and I both want the same thing, an end to the killing. For all our sakes." Kazal studied her face for a long, searching moment. At last, he gave a slow nod. "We will see if your faith in diplomacy is warranted. Transmit the details to my staff. I make no promises. But the Ascendancy will attend your summit. Don't make me regret this, Terran." With that, the Admiral spun on his heel and stalked out, leaving Lyra standing alone in the briefing room. She let out a shaky breath, scarcely believing what had just happened. They were really doing this, a chance for peace after so much needless bloodshed. It wouldn't be easy. The Zethari and the Krill had years of enmity and distrust to overcome. But it was a start, a fragile first step on the long road to healing. In the Terrans, Lyra felt a surge of determination as she considered her people's role in all this. They had been victims of this conflict, unwilling conscripts caught between two warring juggernauts. But now they had a chance to be something more. Mediators, peacekeepers, a voice of reason in a galaxy consumed by strife. It was a heavy burden, but one she was finally ready to embrace. The Terran Confederacy could no longer stand apart, pretending the troubles of the galaxy did not concern them. In a universe so fundamentally interconnected, the suffering of one was the suffering of all. They had to engage with their galactic neighbors, to work towards a future of cooperation and understanding, even if it meant weathering the storms of war to get there. Lyra activated her comm unit, opening a channel to engineering. "Vrax, it's Captain Jackson. We're a go for the Peace Summit. I'll send you the time and coordinates." The Krill's voice carried a rare note of hope. "I knew you wouldn't let me down, Captain. I'll inform my government and see you at the summit. Let's end this damn war." "Roger that," Lyra replied. "And Vrax, thank you for believing in us. In me." "You Terrans really are too soft," the Krill said. But she could hear the smile behind his words. Lyra laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. "I suppose there are worse things to be. Safe travels, my friend." As the channel closed, the captain took a deep, centering breath. Then she squared her shoulders and strode out to face her crew, ready to lead them into an uncertain but hopeful future. The road ahead would be long and far from smooth. There would be setbacks, conflicts, painful concessions on all sides. The scars of war could not be erased overnight, but for the first time since this odyssey began, Lyra felt a sense of purpose kindling in her heart. A vision of a better tomorrow, one where Terrans, Zethari, Kryll, and all the races of the galaxy could coexist in harmony. It was a dream worth fighting for, even if she spent the rest of her life in its pursuit. As her ship set course for the summit that could change the face of the cosmos, Captain Lyra Jackson allowed herself a small, determined smile. The Terran Confederacy had a new role to play among the stars, and she would be proud to help lead the way. The universe waited, poised on the cusp of transformation, as three disparate peoples, Terran, Zethari, and Krill, hurtled toward a shared destiny. The first halting steps had been taken. Now the true work of building a lasting peace could begin. It would not be an easy road. Painful compromises and uncomfortable truths awaited. Ancient grudges and fresh wounds would test their resolve. But the dream of a united cosmos, bound together by understanding and common cause, beckoned them onward, a shining future, purchased through courage, sacrifice, and an unyielding commitment to hope. And as her ship crossed the infinite sea of stars, Captain Lyra Jackson held fast to that vision, a promise whispered to the waiting heavens. The Terran Confederacy would be the bridge between worlds. The galaxy would never be the same.